Resident Evil Zombie is the most disrespected enemy in gaming history. Everyone treats them like target practice, like walking punching bags that exist just to waste your ammo. But the actual numbers tell a completely different story. Today I'm breaking down the deadliest enemies in the entire Resident Evil franchise, from the ones you laugh at to the ones that are literally unkillable, starting with the enemy you've been underestimating your entire life: zombies. Here's a fun experiment. Ask any Resident Evil 2 player how many handgun shots it takes to kill a zombie. Most people will say 4, maybe 5. The real answer? Around 10, and I can prove it. The average zombie in Resident Evil 2 has roughly 840 hit points. A standard handgun body shot deals about 80 damage. That means you're burning through 10 rounds on a single zombie in a hallway. Headshots bump that up to around 100 damage, which still means 8 or 9 clean hits. Miss the head and clip a leg. That's only 50 damage per shot. Suddenly one zombie is eating half your ammo reserve, and you haven't even reached the next save room. Try the knife? Knife pokes deal a pathetic 20 to 30 damage against an enemy with up to 840 HP. That's not a strategy, that's a death wish. But here's where it gets weird. 3 specific zombies in Leon's prison scenario have exactly 1 hit point. 1 hit and they're done. Nobody knows why. These 3 enemies break every rule the game establishes about zombie durability, and the community has been arguing about it for years. Are they intentional? A developer oversight? Some kind of mercy mechanic for an already brutal section? Nobody has a definitive answer, which means the enemy you thought you understood completely still has secrets buried in its code. But zombies are a warm-up compared to what's next, because the licker doesn't even need eyes to ruin your entire run. Licker. Most players see a licker for the first time and immediately think the same thing. It's blind, so I'm safe. That instinct will get you killed faster than almost anything else in Resident Evil. Here's the thing. Lickers have 0 eyes. None. Their entire visual system is gone, but what replaced it is so much worse. That exposed enlarged brain isn't just grotesque decoration. It's a hypersensitive auditory processing organ that turns every single sound you make into a targeting beacon. Every footstep, every reload, every door you open, every healing animation you trigger in a panic. The licker hears all of it, and it reacts faster than most sighted enemies in the entire series, and the way they attack is genuinely nightmarish. Their muscle structure is completely externally reorganized, meaning they can lunge from distances that make no physical sense for a grounded enemy. They crawl walls, they drop from ceilings, they close gaps from angles your brain isn't wired to expect, because normal enemies simply can't produce those movement patterns. But here's where it gets really unsettling. The evolved licker in the PS1 version of Resident Evil 2 only has 40 HP. That's paper thin. A couple of clean shotgun blasts and it's done. So the danger was never about durability. It was never about tanking hits. The entire threat is encounter design and your own panic. Lickers punish your habits. Running, shooting, healing. Literally everything a competent player does instinctively becomes a death sentence. Your skill is the weapon they use against you, and that's a level of design most enemies in the series never reach. But at least a licker needs to hear you. The next enemy on this list doesn't need any of your senses to find you, because it's already inside the host. NE-beta parasite. Most parasites need a host to matter. NE-beta doesn't, and that's what makes it terrifying. Here's the thing. NE-beta doesn't infect healthy humans. It doesn't need to. It specifically targets hosts already infected by the T-virus, latching onto mutated tissue, and feeding on it. So that zombie stumbling towards you, that licker crawling across the ceiling, they're not just threats on their own anymore. They're potential vessels. And once any beta gets inside, everything changes. The parasite overrides the host's behavior completely. Whatever instincts or patterns that enemy had before, gone. Replaced with controlled, directed aggression and boosted physical combat ability. A standard infected enemy becomes a weapon, not a mindless one, a controlled one. But here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. Any beta doesn't just sit around waiting for a host to wander by. It can survive and move independently outside of a body for a considerable amount of time. This isn't some fragile organism that dies in open air. It's a functional predator between hosts, actively hostile toward humans, hunting for its next vessel while being perfectly capable of threatening you on its own. And the worst part, the tool you'd naturally reach for doesn't work. Antiviral spray. The item literally designed to counter viral mutants in Operation Raccoon City does absolutely nothing to NE-beta-S. You brought the right weapon for every other infected creature in the game, and against this thing, it's useless. Wrong tool for the job, no fallback plan. So you're dealing with a parasite that makes existing threats smarter and deadlier. survives on its own as an autonomous predator, and shrugs off the one countermeasure you'd bet your life on. It's not just dangerous, it's a force multiplier with no off switch. And yet, any beta is still just a footnote compared to the thing Umbrella built to carry its bigger, nastier cousin, T-103 Tyrant. Most bioweapons in Resident Evil are accidents, failed experiments, one-off horrors that crawled out of a lab nobody was watching. The T-103 is none of those things. It was designed from the ground up to be manufactured. Not one monster, a product line. And that distinction changes everything. See, a single Tyrant is a boss fight. You encounter it, you survive it, you move on. But the T-103 was built for mass production. Umbrella wasn't creating a weapon. They were creating inventory. Individual units were assigned series identifiers and shipped to specific locations like military hardware. T-078, for example, was cataloged and delivered directly to Rockford Island. Not unleashed, not escaped. Shipped, with a tracking number. Now let's talk about what arrives when that shipment shows up. The T-103's body and coat are described as nearly bulletproof. Conventional firearms do almost nothing to the torso, limbs, or midsection. The only consistently documented weak spot is the exposed head. That's it. One target on a walking tank that never stops moving toward you. You're not fighting this thing. You're trying to land precision headshots on something that shrugs off everything else. But here's where it gets worse. Development files classify the T-103 with accelerated metabolism and exemplary regenerative capability. That means whatever damage you do manage to land is being actively undone in real time. You shoot it, it heals. You shoot it again, it heals again. The damage window is constantly closing. Strategy documentation for dealing with a T-103 literally advises running while shooting the head, not standing your ground. Not finding cover, running, and hoping your aim holds long enough to matter. That's the official best case scenario against one unit. Umbrella had dozens cataloged and ready to deploy. Cold serial numbers on shipping manifests, each one representing a regenerating, bulletproof nightmare that you can barely slow down, let alone stop. But if the T-103 is terrifying as a product, wait until you meet the version that was given a mission, a target, and zero intention of ever stopping. Mr. X, most enemies in Resident Evil give you a chance. They have a room, a patrol, a territory. You walk in, you deal with them, you move on. Mr. X doesn't work like that. The T-00 Tyrant has one objective: find you and kill you. No idle state, no patrol route, no territory, just relentless, unending forward pursuit until one of you is dead. And here's the thing. You can't really fight him, not in any meaningful way. His entire body is nearly bulletproof, and the only documented weak point is his exposed head. Sounds manageable, right? Except every single second you spend lining up a headshot is a second he's closing the distance. And when he reaches you, his punches deal massive damage. We're talking hits that can end a healthy run in 2 or 3 connections. But that's not even the worst part. Mr. X has a rising uppercut that is a confirmed one-hit kill. Not a you'll survive with a sliver of health hit. A kill. One mistimed dodge in a narrow hallway, one bad camera angle, one moment of hesitation, and your run is over. Instantly. In Leon's scenario, this is your reality for most of the campaign. There is no weapon capable of stopping him until near the very end. The entire middle stretch of the game is a sustained survival exercise where every decision you make, every door you open, every resource you spend happens under the constant pressure of knowing he is walking towards you right now. That's the real genius of Mr. X. He's not a boss fight. He's an atmosphere. He turns locked doors into death traps. He turns backtracking into gambling. He turns silence into dread because you know the footsteps are coming. But if Mr. X feels like an unstoppable nightmare, wait until you meet the thing Umbrella built specifically to be smarter than him. Nemesis T-Type. Nemesis isn't just a bigger tyrant, it's a tyrant with 2 brains. Let me explain. Every tyrant you've seen so far, the T-103, Mr. X, all of them, they're running on a single neural system. Powerful, sure, but limited. Nemesis is different because Umbrella implanted something called the NE alpha parasite directly into a tyrant host, and that parasite formed its own separate supplementary brain. 2 cognitive systems running in parallel inside one body. One belongs to the tyrant, the other belongs to the thing feeding on it, and that second brain is everything. It's what processes tactical information independently, what elevates Nemesis beyond the lumbering pursuit behavior of a standard Mr. X. Where Mr. X walks toward you with brute determination, Nemesis calculates. It adapts. It uses weapons. It makes decisions that no base tyrant model is capable of making, because it literally has a second mind doing the thinking. But here's where it gets worse. The NE alpha parasite doesn't just sit there. It's hyperactive. It grows exponentially by feeding on the host's own tissue, which means the longer Nemesis exists, the more developed and dominant that parasite brain becomes. It doesn't just chase you, it improves while it chases you. Every encounter you survive, the thing hunting you is getting smarter, and you can actually see this happening. In Nemesis's later mutation stages, the parasite's adult form becomes visually apparent, resembling a massive, enlarged human brain bulging through the host's body. That's not random mutation. That's the parasite winning. This wasn't an accident either. The Sales Office FX in Resident Evil 3 identifies a specific chemical, VTJ98, used to incubate the NET type. That level of detail means Umbrella had a full cultivation protocol, a recipe. They knew exactly what they were building. But even Nemesis, with its dual brain system and escalating intelligence, looks simple compared to what the G virus did to William Birkin. William Birkin. William Birkin didn't become G because Umbrella wanted him to. He became G because Umbrella wanted him dead. When the USS team gunned him down and left him bleeding out in his own lab, Birkin did the only thing a desperate, dying man, surrounded by his life's work, could do. He injected himself with the G virus. Not in a controlled environment, not with safety protocols, not with any plan for what came next. Just a needle, a prototype virus, and the raw biological will to not die. And here's what makes the early stage of G one of the most disturbing things in the entire franchise. In G1 form, Birkin wasn't gone. He remembered. He retained his intelligence, his memories, his identity. He pursued the Umbrella soldiers who shot him using a metal pipe as a weapon. Not claws, not tendrils. A pipe, like a man getting revenge, not a monster hunting prey. And in certain moments, he called out his daughter Sherry's name. Let that sink in. A mutating, half-human creature still cognizant enough to recognize his own child. Still father enough to say her name. That's not a boss fight. That's a tragedy. But G doesn't stay tragic for long. G undergoes 5 documented stages, and each one strips away more of the man underneath. G-cells don't just mutate, they continuously corrupt the host's flesh between encounters. So G3 isn't a weaker version of G1 that took more damage. It's a categorically different organism. The intelligence disappears, the memories dissolve, what replaces them is raw, overwhelming biological mass that exists only to grow and consume. And the weak points reflect this descent into pure body horror. In certain forms, the critical vulnerability is a cluster of eye growths hidden inside a lamprey eel mouth. The game literally makes you aim into the most visually grotesque part of the creature to deal real damage. The design punishes hesitation. Birkin wanted to survive. The G-virus made sure he'd never stop surviving. It just forgot to keep him human. But if G is what happens when one man loses control of his own creation, wait until you see what happens when someone engineers a virus specifically designed to reshape the entire human species. Ouroboros. Most viruses in Resident Evil don't come with a dosage chart. Ouroboros does. 1 bottle for subjects at or above 60 kilograms. 2/3 of a bottle for 40 to 60. Half a bottle for 20 to 40. 1/3 for anything under 20 kilograms. That's children. They wrote dosage instructions for children. And the clinical precision of that chart, sitting right next to what Ouroboros actually does to a human body, is one of the most quietly disturbing things in the entire franchise. Albert Wesker developed Ouroboros with one goal: a stable, immortal, superhuman state. He named it after the Ouroboros symbol, the snake eating its own tail, which tells you everything you need to know about Wesker's self-awareness. Zero irony filters on that man. But here's the thing. When Ouroboros works, it genuinely works. A successful adaptation doesn't just buff the host, it rewrites them. The subject stops aging entirely. They no longer need any stabilizing serum. Speed, strength, and regeneration all get pushed to near supernatural levels. This isn't a mutation like the G-virus where you're slowly losing yourself across 5 stages of body horror. Ouroboros is a complete biological overhaul. You go inhuman. You come out something else entirely, but you come out functional. And it doesn't stop at the host's own body. Ouroboros confused with external organic material, stitched limbs, foreign tissue, even metallic components get integrated into a functioning biological mechanical system. The virus doesn't care where the material came from. If it's there, it gets absorbed and repurposed. Now here's where it gets genuinely terrifying. That's what happens when adaptation succeeds. When it fails, the subject doesn't just die. Ouroboros redirects outward and begins assimilating every piece of organic matter in the surrounding environment. A failed test subject becomes a growing, consuming mass that spreads across the room, the building, whatever it can reach. The subject becomes the room. If containment fails, there is no ceiling on how large the thing can get. That's exactly why the protocols exist. If Ouroboros successfully adapts to a subject's DNA, documentation mandates urgent reporting and immediate containment procedures. Not observation, not study, containment. Because even the people who made this thing understood that a successful result might be more dangerous than a failed one. But Ouroboros was always a means to an end, and the man who created it was already something far worse than anything the virus could produce. Albert Wesker. Albert Wesker is the most dangerous kind of enemy in Resident Evil. Not because of what he can do, but because of the gap between what he thinks he is and what he actually is. Let me explain. Wesker's biological enhancement program ran on two separate tracks. The first was the T. Wesker prototype virus, a strain Birkin discovered and personally handed to Wesker. This thing could fully revive dead tissue and restore organisms without causing zombification. No rotting flesh, no mindless hunger, no degradation. Just a clean biological resurrection. That alone puts it in a category almost nothing else in Resident Evil occupies. The second track was Ouroboros, which Wesker engineered to push those enhancements even further toward genuine immortality. Stop aging, eliminate physiological instability, become something permanently beyond human limitation. Here's the thing. The T. Wesker strain gave him real, measurable upgrades, enhanced metabolism, increased durability, regenerative capacity that could pull him back from injuries that would kill any normal person. But Birkin's own research notes flagged it as a prototype, not a finished product, a prototype, meaning Wesker was essentially running his own body as an ongoing experiment with no confirmed, stable endpoint. Every day he existed in that enhanced state was another day of testing whether the whole system would hold together, and by 2006 it was already showing cracks, visible aging, wrinkles, physical wear. The man who projected himself as an immortal god was getting older, slower. Whatever the T. Wesker virus had given him, it wasn't true immortality, it was a significantly delayed version of it. The clock was still ticking, just quieter. But here's where it gets really interesting. Wesker retains full sensory experience, including pain. He can be stunned. He can be temporarily incapacitated by sufficient bodily damage. His regeneration is real, but it costs energy. And in at least one documented case, that energy ran out completely, causing a temporary death state. The machine shut off because it ran out of fuel. That's the real Albert Wesker, a man who understood the science well enough to build one of the most dangerous biological threat profiles in the entire franchise, but couldn't fully solve the problem for himself. He projected invincibility. The biology delivered something less, still extraordinary, still terrifying, but mortal. And yet, compared to what's coming next, even Wesker's enhancements look modest, because the final entry on this list doesn't just resist death, it makes death almost mechanically impossible. Super Tyrant. Every single enemy on this list was built, engineered, designed in a lab with a specific purpose. The Super Tyrant is different. The Super Tyrant is what happens when the design fails. See, standard tyrants have a power limiter built into their biology. It's basically a biological leash that keeps the mutation in check, keeps the weapon controllable, keeps it useful. The Super Tyrant is the moment that leash snaps. The body mutates beyond its own engineered constraints, skeletal growth rips through the arms, forming crude claws, the upper body mass explodes outward, and what you're left with isn't a weapon anymore. It's a catastrophe with a heartbeat, and the game knows it. The Super Tyrant is documented with 1 billion hit points. Not a million, not 10 million, 1 billion. That number is so absurd, it doesn't even function like a game stat. It reads like a developer writing, "You are not supposed to kill this thing in the only language the engine understands." Now, to be fair, that billion HP figure comes from community-extracted data and modding datasets rather than an official Capcom stat sheet, and there's real fan skepticism about the exact precision of those numbers. But here's the thing, it almost doesn't matter what the exact number is, because the encounter design tells the same story from every angle. The upper body carries a 60% damage reduction, the head carries 50% reduction, and the lower half? Completely invulnerable. 0 damage, period. So the tiny fraction of the body you can actually hurt is also the part that absorbs more than half of everything you throw at it. But here's where it gets genuinely cruel. There's a hidden fight timer governing the encounter, starting at roughly 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Every time you stagger the Super Tyrant, that timer accelerates by 50%. Up to 3 times. Let me say that again. The game punishes you for fighting back, doing well, landing shots, actually hurting this thing. It makes the situation more dangerous. The countdown speeds up because you dared to resist, and the timer has a hard floor. The minimum threshold before the game hands you a rocket launcher sits at around 1 minute and 30 seconds. You literally cannot outshoot this encounter. The game has a built-in mechanical guarantee that you will eventually receive the one tool that actually works, because no combination of weapons in your inventory was ever going to get the job done. That's what makes the Super Tyrant the deadliest enemy in Resident Evil. Not just the billion HP, not just the damage reduction, not just the invulnerable lower body. It's the philosophy behind the encounter. Every other enemy on this list was designed to be defeated. Some are harder than others. Some require strategy, resource management, or specific weak points, but they were all built with the assumption that a skilled player could win. The Super Tyrant was built to be survived, not beaten, not outsmarted. Survived. The encounter literally will not let you win on your own terms. It waits until you've endured enough, then gives you the answer. Everything before that moment is just the game proving a point. You were never in control. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.